Chapter 16 of The Calling by By-L.C. Pye. Talia. Hatley was buzzed with excitement for the Harvest Festival. I tried to process everything I was seeing as I walked down the tavern steps. Even the tavern was covered in these warm colors of rusted ochre, terracotta, and moss green. The pinto was decorated with flags and ribbons covering every stall from top to bottom. It was the first time Hatley seemed alive. I peeked at the well that was finished last night. It was already decorated with ribbons and flowers. Early this morning, Adira and I had gone to see if the Kalans needed any help, but the house was basically empty. There were only a few patients about to leave. The tonic worked quickly, and now that no one was drinking the contaminated water, everyone seemed to be better. Adira was waiting for me at the bottom of the stairs, with her arms casually crossed over her chest, but she appeared no less intimidating. The villagers walking by kept a wide berth from where she was standing. Since arriving in Hatley, Adira had been a constant presence at my side. I assumed it was because Alon wanted to keep tabs on me. "Ready?" she asked. We were supposed to meet everyone in the center of the Pinta before the festival officially started. "Yes, I answered while checking out the artistry that transformed the village. "Is it like this in Gasmere?" Adira walked forward, expecting me to keep pace. My eyes widened as my shadow. She had never really tried to engage in conversation with me. "No, our decorations are not this grand," I answered, while jogging to catch up. "We had a few decorations that each calling would put up. It was nothing compared to this." Adira and I moved through the stalls, gazing up at the braided fabric that draped down between each stall, fitted with elaborate arrangements of the flowers. The air was filled with the rich aroma of flowers, along with a sweet and dusty smell from the hay. The draped fabric created a pathway through the Pinta that led to the center, where a large area had been cleared for the entertainment and dancing, which would take place later. "That is the same, though," I said between laughs. "That is the same, though," I said between laughs, nodding toward the children chasing each other around a pile of hay, probably searching for some hidden treasure. My cheeks began to ache from the wide smile plastered on my face. Even if I wasn't in Gasmere, I had still found the same spirit of the Harvest Festival here at Hatley. It was the one festival King Madden allowed Landor to celebrate from the old ways. It was a gift from our benevolent king. But after what Mrs. Kalan had said, I wondered if he only did it to placate the people. When I was younger, my parents told me told me that the Harvest Festival, which had been celebrated for hundreds of years, marked the new season. It was created to not only celebrate the previous years, but to also celebrate a new start. Early on, the king and queen would open their doors to the palace and put on a grand celebration for the people of Landor. Villagers would make the pilgrimage to Lycia to partake in the festivals. The king and queen would also take the time to hear about the different needs of the villages and help with whatever needs they may have. All of that came to a stop when King Madden ascended the throne. From what I knew, he never opened up the palace gates to the people of Landor, let alone took the time to help villages thrive. Does your village look similar to this? I asked, stretching out my arms as I spun in a circle. Adira tried to hold back her laughter as she grabbed my arm, stopping me before I ran into a man who was spinning hoops on different parts of his body. Yes and no, she answered. I maintained eye contact until she finally rolled her eyes at me and exhaled. We all go out when it comes to our festival. It's similar in the aspect, but the scenery and style of decorations are very different, she explained. As we slowly walked through the artist stalls, there were more artists painting like the one we saw a couple of days ago. Festivals? I asked. We stopped and watched as an artist painted a family that stood in front of him. It would be a token for them to remember the day by. It's not going to work, Adira pursed her lips. What? Casually asking me questions to weasel information out of me? It won't work. A crease formed in the middle of her forehead. It's best that you know as little as possible. When I opened my mouth to ask why, Adira shook her head and playfully shoved me forward. Let's go, Erlone, and we'll start worrying. The festival officially started at midday. It commenced with the callings, competing against one another in various games. There were games the kids could play, but the majority of the children loved to watch the adults compete and would try to sneak into the adult games themselves. After the games, every calling would go back to their own communities and share a meal. Afterwards, everyone would come back for the music and dancing, lasting late into the night. Anticipation filled me at seeing how Hatley would do things compared to Gasmere. Hurry up! They're about to start the games, Gemma yelled from across the street before diving into the crowd forming in the center. Adira and I had jogged to make sure we didn't lose Gemma, but finally we broke into an opening where a group of women in white flower crowns were dancing to one of Landor's traditional songs. They spun and clapped, letting their long skirts and rich, earthy colors twirl. You're missing the best part, Gemma laminated as she grabbed both of our hands and began pulling us to where the rest of the group stood watching. Aren't they beautiful? Gemma exclaimed, unable to take her eyes off of them. They sure are, I agreed. When we approached the group, I scanned the crowd and froze. There was a group of adults surrounding Nadav and Hafsa. Gemma, who are those people? I asked calmly, not wanting to frighten her. Some of Hatley's elders. I pushed forward to get closer to them. For once, I was thankful for my height. I was able to see into the circle where Hafsa and Nadav stood, their hoods down, shaking forearms with two of the elders. We are so grateful for everything you all have done for Hatley. Please know that you will always be welcomed here. One of the elders spoke as he smiled at Alon and the rest of the group. If it wasn't for your willingness to help, many more of our people would have died. The woman elder who had shaken Hafsa's arm said. My mouth dropped. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The elders walked away and I shook my head in disbelief. From the corner of my eye, I caught Raph watching me. His jaw clenched and there was a strange look on his face. But when our eyes met, he shifted his gaze to the dancers. What is his problem with me? The games are next. Gemma began to jump up and down by my side, pulling my attention back to the dancers who were leaving the cleared area. They are my favorite to watch, but the healers never win, Gemma said, kicking the dirt with her shoe. I understood her frustration. In Gazmere, the artists, our smallest calling, never won the games. They hardly ever competed. It was time for the Harvest Festival games. The Harvest Games to begin. A tall, slender man announced as he walked to the middle of the cleared space. We made our way to stand next to Gil as he continued. Would two representatives for each calling make their way into the middle? He paused, waiting for volunteers to join him. I peered down and saw the disappointment at not having the healers being represented on Gemma's face. A movement from the side of us caught my attention as Raph approached Gemma, his hand held out to her. Will you do me the honor of being my partner? Gemma lit up. Yes, she yelled, clapping her hands together. She grabbed Raph's hand and dragged him into the center. He was twice her size, but that didn't deter her one bit. My heart warmed at the joy on Gemma's face. But I was also confused by Raph. I had never seen him show this amount of kindness to anyone. Whispers pulled my attention back to the crowd. Everyone was talking in hushed tones and staring at Raph and Gemma. He wasn't a healer, which was evident by his green tunic. The announcer took a hesitant step toward them, but one side glance from Ralph caused him to retreat back to his spot. He swallowed and cleared his throat before stating what the games would entail. The first game involved two people standing across from each other, tossing a chicken egg back and forth as the distance between them increased. The game started, and I stood there confused, watching Raph encourage Gemma every step of the way. With every throw, he tried his best to be gentle with tossing the egg to her. Maybe he does have a heart under all those daggers. Two teams were left. Raph and Gemma, representing the healers, and a team representing the farmers. It was Gemma's turn to throw the egg back to Raph, and I could have sworn the whole crowd held their breath in anticipation. They were at a disadvantage with Gemma being so young. The two farmers were both around Raph's age. But Gemma didn't let that stop her from giving it her all. Determination was written all over her face. She drew a deep breath and then threw the egg as far as she could. It landed about 5 feet in front of Raph. A big moan came from the crowd, but then I heard the laughter break as Gemma stood in the middle, clenching her stomach, pointing in our direction. I turned to see what she was pointing at and saw Gil wiping egg off his face. I glanced back at Raph, who stood with a small smile forming. He then went over to Gemma and lifted her onto her back as they made their way over to us. She was beaming from ear to ear. The next game was stone throwing. There were 4 large stones placed on one side of the clearing. One representative from each calling would try to throw it the farthest. Someone from each calling walked toward the stone. toward a stone, except there was no one claiming the healer stone. Gil and Nadav started to chant Eaton's name. Eaton urged them to stop, but that only seemed to encourage them. They shoved him out into the clearing. The crowd went silent. Eaton was twice the size of everyone else out there, and he was the last to throw his stone. Those before him did well, and 2 of them were currently tied. Again, the whole crowd went silent. He picked up the stone as if it weighed the same as a loaf of bread and threw it back toward his ear. With a loud exhale, he thrust the stone forward. It soared to the other side, making the people over there back away. The stone landed on the edge of the clearing. The crowd erupted with cheers. Eaton was the winner. The healers had won that game. Gemma, still on Raph's back, started screaming with excitement. A whole group couldn't help but let the thrill of victory take hold. After the stone toss, axe throwing came next, and we were wholly invested in the games now. We started to strategize about who would be the best choice for this particular game. Raph's name was thrown around, but since he had already participated in one game, we didn't think he should do another. Then all eyes landed on Alone. No, he said, shaking his head. This is your fun. I'm not going to participate. They didn't try to persuade him. However, Gemma wasn't going to take no for an answer. Please, Alone, do it for me? She asked with the biggest brown eyes I had ever seen. We knew he didn't stand a chance. He gave Gemma a small smile and shook his head. He was first to throw his axe at the wooden target. In front of our 4 competitors, he brought the axe behind his head and with a sharp exhale released it with a snap of his arms. There was no doubting he had thrown an axe before. The axe broke through the wood with a large crack. The wood split right down the middle. Everyone watching stood frozen. A small boy from the front of the crowd yelled out, "That was awesome! Do it again!" Everyone started chanting, "Do it again," over and over again. Alon's eyes fell to the ground, evidently not wanting the attention, but equally not able to walk away. He extended his arms out to the crowd. Hushed, he grabbed the spare axe next to him. It was the best throw out of 2, and turned his back against the target. His hands clutched the handle as he brought the axe down toward the ground. He looked over his shoulder and winked at the little boy. In one smooth motion, he brought the axe over his head in the arc and let it fly. The axe found the center of the target, and the crowd erupted. Children ran out into the clearing and started to climb all over Alon. Utter chaos ensued as parents tried to peel their kids off of him. Thankfully, that was the last game, because there was no way anyone would be able to bring things back into order. Those were the best festival games ever, Gemma cried, as she got off Raph's back and ran to her parents with order returned. Now that the parents had finally gained some control over their children, the Pinta cleared out. "Gemma!" a small voice yelled. Jared's curly head popped up from the throng of people, his parents close behind. The Collins had invited the Gradys to join us all for dinner, which they had accepted. As we made our way back to the tavern, the Gradys congratulated us on winning the games. The tavern owner had granted Eaton the use of his kitchen for the evening, and I hadn't stopped thinking about what he would be making for us all day. The owner also permitted for us to eat there alone because he would be joining the other merchants. His only stipulation was that Eaton had to save him a portion of everything. Trailing behind the group, I watched Hafsa, Mrs. Collins, and Mr. Grady laugh together as they watched Eaton clap Mr. Collins back. A feeling of bliss engulfed me. Jules would have loved to have seen this. "Hang on, Jules, I'm coming," I whispered.